Welcome to the World of Warcraft Legion What's Next panel.
Hello, Blizzcon! I love it. This is the best time of year. Thank you all so much for coming out, coming all this way from across the country, from across the world, to celebrate the community that we've built together and to learn about what's coming next in some of your favorite Blizzard games. So I know sometimes, you might be hoping that you're going to be in attendance for the announcement of an all-new expansion. Well, this is not one of those years. It'll be way too soon. We're working on one, of course, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Today is all about Legion and what is coming next for you and for us and for everyone in Azeroth. So just before we jump into it, first off, I want to begin by talking a little bit about our philosophy, about how we're approaching Legion content, how we're doing things a little bit differently this time around, and what's really guiding us. And so I think point number one, and this is really the ideal, the value that drives all of the decisions we're making about Legion and about the content that goes into Legion, it's delivering a steady stream of content for all of you, for all of our players. And that means, it means a lot of content. Everyone loves content, right? It means a lot of it, but the steady part also means pacing it out appropriately, making sure that there's something new to do, something to look forward to, something just around the corner, but also that you're not getting overwhelmed, that you're not feeling like you're falling behind, like the next thing isn't coming out before most people are ready for it. So balancing those two ideals, those two competing goals, is kind of what's leading us forward. Next, we really want to double down on one of the magical things about the MMORPG genre. The fact that it's a persistent online world where things are happening when you're not necessarily around. It's a world that's growing, it's a world that's evolving. And we want to really create this sense and instill this sense of a living world where you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen when you log in every day. Obviously, you don't know exactly what world quests or emissaries are going to be up, but there could also be random holidays, different events, things that are changing not just through patches, but through just a scheduled, unfurled content that make this a dynamic, evolving, living world. And how we pursue those two goals, we want to change up a little bit how we go about doing that. I think in the past, we've really had these large monolithic patches that have anchored all of our expansion patch content. Things like 6.2 Fury of Hellfire or 3.3 Fall of the Lich King. Big raid tier, 10+ raid bosses, some outdoor stuff to do, a whole new tier of item level. And there's a great place for that type of patch, that type of patch like 6.2. But a patch like 6.2.3, for what it was, actually also was very effective. It was a small patch. We weren't trying to add a ton of content, but we added Valor points to upgrade your gear, new goals to pursue. The Moose Mount, of course, from the end of Hellfire Citadel, as we saw the community rally together and make a push to defeat Heroic Archimond. Expansions to Time Walking and the Time Reaver mount from there. Just new goals, new rewards, things to breathe life into content that was already out there. That's another arrow in our quiver. And then we also want to experiment with a middle ground, what we can call a medium-sized patch. I think 7.1 is a great example of that type of patch. Who here's had a chance to check out the new Karazhan dungeon in the last week and a half? Yes. One of my favorite pieces of content we've put in the game ever. And that's, it's not a huge patch, it's not the giant raid tier, but it's definitely not a 6.1, it's definitely not a 6.2.3. There's a dungeon, there's a small raid, there's outdoor quest content, there's something for everybody to engage with and move forward with. And so really, it's all about content, it's all about getting it into your hands in the right package in the right ways. And so, with all that said, let's start talking about some of it. So, first up, patch 7.1.5. So this is Legion's first small patch, maybe in the same vein as something like 6.2.3. This is what is a small patch like for Legion? Well, a couple things. So this type of patch, like 6.2.3 did, will revolve around a lot of systems, new rewards to strive for, and what we call internally evergreen content. That is to say, content that isn't specifically tied to one moment in the story or one particular zone or a tier of gear, but that could actually be relevant throughout the entire future of World of Warcraft's history and lifespan going forward. And what it also means is that it lets us prioritize getting that content into your hands. Now, we're all too infamous for the soon TM and for holding content until it's ready, for holding patches back or expansions back until they're ready. And that's not something we want to compromise on. But when we make this type of patch, one of the most important things about it is when it gets to you. Because for a live game like this, to some extent, quantity is quality. Making you wait isn't fair, it's not right. And so when we build this type of patch, we want to make sure that the individual features, the pieces that go into it, can actually be separated out if they need to be. So let's say there are 4 things that we want to put in this patch, and when it comes down to it, 3 of them are in great shape, they're good to go. The 4th we feel needs a little bit of work. Now, in a traditional huge patch, like if that thing that needs some work is the main raid zone of the patch, well, the patch isn't going out. But for a patch like this, we can just say, OK, let's take that 4th thing, break it off, we'll put it in a 7.2.5 or something else down the line, and get the 3 things that are awesome into your hands ASAP. So that is our philosophy when we approach this type of patch, and it's a bit different from how we've often done things. So let's begin on actual details. First up, time walking. So time walking, introduced in Warlords of Draenor. It's been awesome kind of updating some of the old dungeons, giving us a chance to scale down, revisit familiar places, and get rewards that are relevant to us at max level. Time marches on, and now Mists of Pandaria kind of comes into the fold. I think philosophically, we feel like time walking is probably only ever going to go to the current expansion -2. Like Warlords probably feels a bit too familiar right now. I don't know that anyone's hankering to jump back into Warlords dungeons today. So Mists, I know, shocking, right? But yes, so Mists is probably where that stops for now. But we're really excited to have all 6 original dungeons from Mists of Pandaria updated for time walking as part of the event rotation. Of course, with a vendor and new toys and items and cosmetic things to chase after associated with that particular expansion. So that is coming in 7.1.5. Pretty standard. This is a perfect example of what we talk about when I say evergreen content. This could really go in any patch if it needed to, but 7.1.5 is where it's going to land. Next, the Brawlers Guild. So the Brawlers Guild shut its doors for renovation, for some improvements with patch 7.0. We did this once in the past. We updated the Brawlers Guild for Warlords of Draenor. That time, all we really did was kind of remix the existing bosses, the existing content. We retuned them, we restructured them into a new hierarchy, had some new rewards. This time we wanted to do something more ambitious, and that's why the guild shut down for a little while, because it's going to take some time to make this happen. So for starters, there are dozens of new bosses coming to Brawlers Guild when it reopens in 7.1.5. So all the familiar favorites are there, but this is always a really fun design exercise for a lot of the encounter design team and others to just make wacky, interesting solo encounters with no real lore constraints. This is definitely not canon. There are no clear rules that apply there other than just make it fun, make it memorable, and at the high end, make it tough. Now, also, we're going to have a new type of battle that can occasionally occur in the Brawlers Guild. As we all know, it's a solo experience, but of course you have crowds that gather to watch, to cheer, to jeer, and to wait their turn to enter the arena. Well, occasionally, when someone's queue pops, it's actually going to spawn a raid-level brawler boss that will pull all players who are currently waiting for their turn into the arena at once. And of course, everyone can share in the rewards and the benefits if you're triumphant, but you never know what's going to happen. Now, one of the really cool things about the Brawlers Guild, as we saw it play out when it first came in Mists of Pandaria, is it is a solo experience, right? You're going in and you have a 2-minute fight to the death against a powerful opponent. But it actually turned into this really cool shared social experience, as people would form groups to buff each other, give each other tips, and generally cooperate and offer encouragement. in pursuit of the shared goal of climbing the ranks and unlocking the rewards there. And so this new currency that we're introducing that you'll earn through your brawls is really all designed to double down on that social experience. The things that you spend this on are shared benefits. Someone can spend Brawler's Gold to unlock a graveyard that will let people respawn right next to the fighting arena, for example, for a period of time. That'll make you really popular with everyone who's there. Or you can unlock someone who will let you make predictions on who you think is going to win the next brawl for a chance at new rewards, and everyone can participate in that once someone unlocks it. Really making you glad that other players are around and just kind of sharing in the shared set of goals that you are pursuing. And of course, there'll be new rewards. And in the Brawlers Guild, that basically means shirts. Just lots and lots of shirts. And also a basilisk mount. Because why not? So yeah, that's one other piece of 715, the return to the Brawlers Guild. Now let's take a look at some of those wacky, crazy brawls that are coming your way soon. So yeah, Brawlers Guild, it's complete chaos. Again, 100% not canon, and that's part of the fun. So next, 715 is going to also introduce something that we call micro-holidays. Now what, you may ask, is a micro-holiday? Well, simple. It's a holiday, but smaller. No, really, right? Like, holidays in World of Warcraft are things like Winter Veil or the Lunar Festival that last for a week or two, offer achievements, some power rewards, a variety of pets, mounts, things like that to obtain. Well, what if we had smaller events that only lasted for a day or two? What are some of the things that citizens of Azeroth might celebrate as part of their existence, as part of what I mentioned earlier in contributing to building a living world? What days might matter to them, and how might we interact with those occasions? So some examples of what I'm talking about here. Now, Ahn'Qiraj Remembrance Day. On January 22nd, 2006, on the Medivh server, I believe, here in North America. I want to say it was led by the Guild Fury, maybe I'm remembering right. The gates of Ahn'Qiraj were opened for the very first time in the world. And that was the culmination of 800,000 linen turn-ins and all other sorts of pain. And the servers crashed continuously. So to celebrate that, on January 22nd every year, we're actually going to take the servers down. No. So to celebrate that on January 22nd, in Silithus, Azeroth will celebrate its Remembrance Day of Ahn'Qiraj as Alliance and Horde rally there, perform objectives in the zone, gather supplies reminiscent of the Carapace fragments that you might have gathered back in the old Scarab Lord days, and turn them in on behalf of your faction. And whichever faction in the entire region, in the entirety of North America, or the entirety of Europe, turns in more during this day, they will have their flag, their banner flown over the walls of Ahn'Qiraj for the entire remainder of the year, until the next Ahn'Qiraj Remembrance Day. So, if you want to show your pride for the Alliance, you want to fight for the Horde, come to Silithus on January 22nd. Again, there's no achievements here, no power rewards. There's no mount or pet or thing that will make you upset if you're a completionist and you missed it. It's just something fun and different to do when you log in during this event. Next, Volunteer Guard Day. So Ahn'Qiraj Remembrance Day, it's pretty serious, big stuff. Volunteer Guard Day is really about showing appreciation and respect for the unsung heroes of the Horde and the Alliance. The Stormwind Patroller, the Orgrimmar City Guard that guard the streets of our fair capitals, keeping them safe from evildoers, wrongdoers who would otherwise enter and do us all harm. So on Volunteer Guard Day, if you salute a guard, you can actually take on their appearance, trade places with them for a little bit, and you can go on patrol around the city and keep it safe from various NPCs and others that will attempt to attack. Just a fun, different thing to do. Now, on one other day every year, in the zone of Feralos, the Freyfeather hippogriffs hatch. These eggs that are carefully tended, they hatch and they fly out to sea. If you are there on that one day each year when it happens, you can witness that happening, that occurrence, and you can get a little buddy of your own, a little young baby hippogriff, Pepe style, that can just accompany you perching, not a mount or a pet for your collection, not a battle pet to do battle with, but just something neat and different. And finally, really the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of seriousness from Ahn'Qiraj Remembrance Day. Sometimes it can be really rough. Sometimes being a citizen of Azeroth can get you down. You're dealing with the Legion, you're dealing with Deathwing, the Lich King, constantly. Every time you turn around, there's some existential threat to our world. Sometimes you just want to kick back, take it easy. And so this is basically Azeroth Spring Break. This is just, sometimes you just want to take a boat out to the lake, get some sun, chill with your friends, or in the case of, in the case of Azeroth, in this case, the flooded Thousand Needles, thanks to Deathwing. But yeah, so when it's boat day, go out there and celebrate. Again, this is in no way, shape, or form intended to be on par or a substitute for a dungeon or a raid. They're just fun, wacky things that are going to vary the flow of life in the world. We have plenty more in store that we're looking to add in the future, and it's just part of that living world idea that can carry forward throughout the years as time moves on. So next. So in patch 7.1 just recently, ardent PvPers definitely noticed something cool happened to Nagrand Arena. We went back and took one of the most classic World of Warcraft arenas, updated it, brought it into 2016 with all new art, all new visuals, and in 7.1.5, we are doing the same thing to Blade's Edge. Let's take a look. So yeah, very much like the update to Nagrand Arena, this is meant to be a one-to-one match in terms of collision. We're really happy with the gameplay there. We're not looking to change the gameplay, just put a very fresh coat of paint on an old favorite. Now, at the end, you may have noticed the ogre on his throne overlooking proceedings in the arena. One cool feature of this arena is this is actually our first arena map that has sort of a built-in voiceover announcer who will observe events and call out things here or there. We'll see how that goes. If it's successful and well-liked, it may be something we do more of. So, not content, but also 7.1.5 gives us a first chance to really dig into a lot of the class changes that we made in Legion. Up until this point, we've mostly focused on fixing bugs. We focused on a lot of hotfix tuning and balancing and tweaking numbers. But 7.1.5 gives us a chance to look more deeply into the substance of class abilities, rotations, talents, things along those lines. And so there's a few things that are going to guide us as we approach those efforts. So first off, we have a lot of data, a lot of feedback. We can look at all of the talent rows across all 36 specs. And we've definitely heard and seen there are many situations where it feels like there's a mandatory talent in a given row, or in other rows there are talents that don't really have a clear purpose. They never seem like they're worth taking. You go to a site like Icy Veins and it has a big red X through it. It's like, this is never worth considering. That's unfortunate. We would like to work on improving that diversity, And some of that's going to be a matter of numbers changes. Sometimes a talent is perfectly well designed, it's just undertuned or it's overpowered. In other cases, however, we need to rework the fundamental concept of that talent. Or perhaps the thing that 98% of players take as a talent should just be a base part of the spec, and we should come up with something new that's going to flesh out that row and make it an interesting choice. That's the type of thing that will be happening in 7.1.5. It's, of course, an ongoing effort, but you'll see some of it here. Next, secondary stats. So obviously, when we build our items, item level isn't always strictly king, but the way rewards are structured, when you go into a new tier, you go into a new zone, and you see something that is 15, 20 item levels higher than anything you've seen before, the way this game is designed, that should be an exciting moment. It should be a reward moment. And too often, due to large disparities between the value of secondary stats, that's not the case. So this patch is also going to give us a chance to take a look at secondary stat balance, trying to narrow that gap a little bit. It's great that if you're a fire mage, you love crit. It's less great that you look at items without it or items with other stats as completely worthless. And there's a middle ground there where you can have value and excitement about some stats while still keeping interest in all of them. Next, and this is kind of one of the most vague points here, but we've also heard a lot of feedback about just the feel, the flow of your rotations, how, abilities that often come into conflict, abilities that are unclear, and 7.1.5 offers us one of the first chances to try to address a lot of that feedback in the aftermath of launch. And they're just pure mechanical improvements that we can make that aren't about balance, they're just about making playing your class a smoother, more pleasant experience all around. And finally, we've definitely heard a lot about this, seen a lot about this. And while we, in the name of streamlining, in the name of focusing spec and class identity in the run-up to Legion, we pruned, we got rid of a number of abilities. There's certainly room now, after that pruning, to have structured growth, to maybe return some of those abilities, to maybe add some new ones, to flesh out toolkits. So for example, if you're a hunter, and you're a marks hunter or a beastmaster hunter, and you don't quite feel like a hunter because you don't have any traps, we agree. It was a mistake to say that... Yeah, it was a mistake, right? It was a mistake to say that only survival has traps. Survival can be the masters of traps without being the only one who have them. There are times where we elevated spec identity at the expense of class identity, and there are places where we can walk that back in the interests of everyone. Or for example, if you're a rogue and you've been running a lot of Mythic Keystone dungeons, and you wish you still had the ability Shroud of Concealment so that you could sneak your group past some packs, and your group might be really happy or excited to have a rogue in the group. That could also be happening in 7.1.5. And by could, I mean is. So that is patch 7.1.5, a small, humble patch in the world of Legion, featuring Season 3 of the Brawlers Guild, Mists of Pandaria Time Walking, micro-holidays, an art update to Blade's Edge, class updates, and more. Bug fixes, new rewards, all kinds of little things. That is the 7.1.5 package. Now, of course, the next question, when? When is this going to be in your hands? When will you learn more? Soon. No, actually really soon. The second we get back from Blizzcon, we're going to work on taking down the 7.1 PTR, working to put 7.1.5 PTR up. You'll see a ton of these changes there. Can't wait to have people jump on, start giving us their feedback, and helping find bugs so we can get into your hands as quickly as possible as all part of a steady stream of content. So 7.1.5, small patch. What comes after 7.1.5? 7.2. Now what possibly could patch 7.2 be? What could that bring? Where might we be going? Seven two is the Tomb of Sargeras. In patch 7.2, we will return to the site of our greatest failure, where Alliance and Horde faltered and broke and barely escaped with our lives, where we lost our leaders in the shadow of the Legion stronghold and we had to retreat. But we've spent the intervening months leveling up, building class orders, recruiting champions, getting artifacts, empowering our artifacts. And it might just be a different story this time around. Where Horde and Alliance failed, the class orders will succeed. Maybe, it's up to you. All 12 classes working together constitute the armies of Legionfall. Where the Alliance and Horde can't necessarily put aside their differences, the leaders of the class orders can see that manifest destiny in front of them and understand the consequences, understand the stakes, and what they must do. And so this is the faction that you will work with, that you will be a part of, that you'll be one of the leaders of, as leader of your class order, as you make your way up the Broken Shore and fight your way to the foot of the Tomb of Sargeras. Of course, there will be all new world quests, both around the world and focused in the Broken Shore. We're incredibly happy with how the world quest system has played out so far. We want to keep doing more with it. And so we see this as really an integral part of making content going forward. When we make quests for a place, when we're telling a story in a place, we're also going to make world quests that complement that story, including things like class-themed, class-focused world quests that are set in the Broken Shore area. Now let's take a look at what the Broken Shore may look like when you return there today. So, a difficult task awaits us at the Broken Shore. So, part of accomplishing our objective, part of making our way to the tomb, is going to involve first claiming a foothold in enemy lands, and then fortifying that foothold, building it up as we strengthen our forces and get ready for that assault. In something that's reminiscent of maybe patch 2.4, Isle of Keldanos, for those who remember that, a big part of what we're going to be doing here is actually restoring and building up old elven ruins into functional structures that can serve as a staging ground as we press the assault forward. And actually, rather than just a sequence as we had it in patch 2.4, here players are going to be actively involved. They're going to have agency in choosing which buildings to build to unlock new content, new rewards, and new ways of interacting with the world. So when you choose whether you want to build or focus on the Nether Disruptor or the Command Center or the Mage Tower and upgrade and fortify those structures, in the course of doing so, you'll be upgrading or you'll be unlocking new world quests. You'll be unlocking new rewards, new vendors, new other types of content, world bosses, what have you, in a way that you, the player, control rather than we, Blizzard, dictating, okay, this is up this day and that's up that day. It's a much more organic way of delivering content and telling the story of the unfolding battle as you fight your way up the Broken Shore towards the tomb. Now, while that's going on at the tomb, at the Broken Shore, what's happening back in the tranquil areas of Val'Sharah, in the hills of High Mountain and Stormheim? Well, the Legion isn't taking this sitting down. The Legion is striking back. So Legion assaults are very much inspired by our pre-launch invasion event that we had in early August, right before Legion, the expansion, came out. There we were defending places like Westfall, Tanaris. This time around in 7.2, we're going to be defending the other zones of the Broken Isles, as the shadow of the Legion falls upon Val'Sharah or upon Azuna or upon Stormheim. And we need to help defend our newfound allies in the Dreamweavers or the High Mountain Tauren and fight back the Legion so that we can keep pressing our advantage on the Broken Shore. So these zones come under attack. When they do, it'll basically disable all the world quests currently active in the zone and The skybox turns dark and terrifying. All sorts of demons pop up, Legion command ships in the skies. A very familiar scene for those of you who participated in Invasions back in August. This time around, we're wrapping it into our world quest structure. So as you arrive in the zone, you'll be completing a variety of what are essentially world quests to take down Legion lieutenants, to clear out Legion presence from fortified areas. Once you've done enough of that, and by the way, those will count towards your emissary if you have an emissary up in the zone, so don't worry about, world quests going away temporarily. Once you've done enough of that, you'll unlock a target of opportunity and be able to strike at the Legion commander on the ground leading the assault. Again, very similar stuff to what you saw back in August. But then there's one extra step beyond that. Once you fight that assault on the ground, well, there's this massive aerial presence. There's this, Legion cruiser in the skies, bombarding, beaming down troops. And you will join a 3-player scenario, very reminiscent of what we did in Mists of Pandaria, which we haven't really had a chance to revisit in a while. Role agnostic, you can jump right in, and that's where you'll take the fight up onto the Legion ship up in the skies, take that ship down, and fight them back. There's a separate set of content for each of the zones of the Broken Isles, and when you're questing on the Broken Shore and you see a demon invasion pop up, well, you better head out there, because there'll be great rewards to be won, and of course, we need to safeguard all of our lands from the Legion. So now when I say you're going to head out there, well, how are you going to do that? So often it's been asked, well, so what's the deal with flying? What's the plan with flying? Am I going to use my Flight Master's whistle and then go to the nearest flight point, mount up on my trusty steed, and by steed I mean water strider, and head off to the nearest invasion? Or will I soar majestically through the clouds, gazing down upon the lands of the Broken Isles? Yes. Yes, you will. So patch 7.2 brings the second part and the conclusion of the Broken Isles Pathfinder achievement. So this achievement basically entails the first part, which many people have worked on and already completed and earned their mount speed bonus in the outdoor world, plus doubling down on and following the philosophies that we laid out in Warlords when we announced our flying plans there. Explore the new Broken Shore area, defend the different zones from the new Legion assaults that will fall upon them, complete the main outdoor quest line associated with the Legion Fall campaign, up to opening the gates of the Tomb of Sargeras. Don't worry, you don't need to go in. There's no raid or dungeon content involved in this. It's all about outdoor world gameplay, because that's what you need to master to unlock flying. And then finally get your reputation up with the Legion Fall, the armies of Legion Fall, and you will be able to fly around the Broken Isles on your character and on all characters on your account. So, pretty awesome. I mean, flying around the Broken Isles, that's great. It's going to really change the way we play the game, and it's something we look forward to for a long time. Could there be anything cooler than flight in the Broken Isles? Well, what if you were doing it on your very own custom class mount for every one of your classes? Take a look at this. So yes, each and every one of those amounts awaits you at the end of your class order campaign, at the end of the Broken Shore experience. And even if you didn't see them all flying in that video, they are, of course, all flying-enabled flying mounts, because you will be flying in the Broken Isles. OK, so moving on. What would the patch, the Tomb of Sargeras, be without the Tomb of Sargeras? So the next raid zone after the Nighthold raid will, of course, be the tomb itself. This is a 9-boss raid where we'll be descending into the depths of the Tomb of Sargeras, once the ancient holy temple of Elune before it fell into the Legion's corruption, where we will harness the Pillars of Creation with the ultimate goal of sealing off the Legion's invasion of our world. We've scoured the 4 zones that we leveled up in to get those 4 pillars. The 5th pillar awaits us, the Eye of Aman'Thul, awaits us in the Nighthold raid at the end of Suramar, coming in the near future. But by the time we make it here, we will have all 5 of those in our possession, and our mission will be putting them to the purpose for which they were designed, for which they were meant. Now, the Tomb of Sargeras, as I mentioned, used to be the Temple of Elune. It offers a really cool opportunity for us to explore more than just, the black and green exterior Legion facade that you see as we actually delve down into its depths. So on this slide here, we actually have a mix of a 2D kind of side cutout and top-down layout of the raid. This is actually one of the first steps in our internal process of making a new raid zone or making a new dungeon. Before any 3D geometry is built, we want to get a sense of the overall structure, the flow, where the bosses are going to be located, and how it all fits together. I look forward to everyone doing their CSI magic and trying to triple enhance on all the little text here. But the raid itself actually has 4 main sections, I would say. When you first enter, you're entering into what we think of as a dark cathedral area. It's the grand glory of Elune fallen into Legion corruption. It's a reflection very much of that exterior art style and just that massive entry hall that you enter into. And that's where the Legion presence is most strongly felt initially. But our objective is actually deep down below. And the Temple of Elune existed millennia ago, before the Sundering, as a complement on the other end of the bridge across from Suramar. And the Sundering itself, of course, wrought terrible damage to the structure itself. So as we descend, we're actually going to spend some time venturing out of the Foundation into underground caverns, where powerful minions of Queen Ashar await us, Naga and their allies. Through that section, we're able to come back into a very low part of the tomb that actually has in many ways escaped the Legion's influence. It's been sealed away since the time of the Sundering. But darkness has been fostered here. Darkness has been growing and overtaking these halls in the millennia since that time. And that is what we enter to discover, though we will need to go in there and go through there to put the pillars to use. And then finally, once we have explored all of those areas, we will unlock a way down into the deepest, lowest depths of the Tomb of Sargeras, where Aegwynn once fought a battle against the Avatar of Sargeras. And, well, we'll have to see what happens there. Let's take a look at some of the foes you'll be fighting. So first off, we have this guy. He's kind of a cross between an Infernal and a Pit Lord. Plan is for him to actually come crashing through the side wall in that main cathedral entrance area, assemble in front of you, and bar your path. We love starting raids off with large, visually impressive foes, kind of going back to Lord Marigar in Icecrown Citadel, and onward from there. Deeper in on the first floor, we have this fellow, a new member of the Legion's army that we've yet to see, kind of a melee variant of the Jailer. As we go further into the Naga-controlled areas, this powerful Naga brute will bar your path, as well as this Sea Witch, who commands a powerful Kraken beside her. Now, in those lowest, deepest recesses of the tomb that I mentioned, there is the reason why the Tomb of Sargeras is called the Tomb of Sargeras. This fellow. This is the husk, this is the fallen avatar of Sargeras that once contained the soul of the Dark Titan himself that was vanquished by Aegwynn. But that dark power, a remnant of it, still lingers within him, within this massive construct, within this terrible creature, and we will have to go through him in order to accomplish our final goal in the depths of the tomb. Oh, also this guy. So, Kil'jaeden himself awaits us. The left hand of Gul'dan, brother to Archimonde, who fell at Hellfire Citadel, and the architect of the Legion's latest invasion and their great plan against Azeroth. Kil'jaeden the Deceiver is the ultimate foe that stands at the end of the Tomb of Sargeras. So that is the raid. So do you guys miss patch dungeons? I mean, I know we did Karazhan recently, but that was almost more of a 5-player raid. But remember when we used to do things like Magister's Terrace or Trial of the Champion, just a little like 3-4 boss dungeon to complement the story we were telling? We really missed that too. So let's do another one. So, as I mentioned in the raid, you'll be descending in the raid. In the dungeon, you're going up, you're climbing the tower, you're climbing the spire of the Temple of Elune. You'll go through 4 bosses along the way. And your goal here is going to be to use one of the 5 pillars of creation, the Aegis of Agrimar, which will be put to a special purpose at the very top of the tower to open the way. This dungeon will be available both in heroic difficulty, queuable normally through looking for group, and mythic difficulty, and of course, mythic keystone difficulties, as with all dungeons. So again, as we saw with the raid, here's a little sort of 2D cutout, top-down view of how the dungeon's going to work. As you enter, you're actually in a balcony overlooking that main entrance hall, overlooking that first room of the raid zone, looking down on the space where you would be if you were there, but instead you're going to be climbing up, sort of the concentric rings as the tower narrows towards the top. You'll be going past what was a monument, what was a building to the glory of Elune, past majestic hanging gardens that grew in moonlight, that have, of course, succumbed to fell taint since then, and the minions of the Legion that infest the halls. So a couple of the enemies you'll be facing in the dungeon include this fellow, because what's a fell garden without a fell tree? And this variant of the Moarg Brute, who will just put a beating on you if you try to pass. So, raid, dungeon. Let's talk a bit about PvP. So, PvP. In 7.2, what we want to do, as well as, of course, having a new season and building upon our reward structures, we want to introduce a new way, a new mode of PvP gameplay, PvP brawls. Now, these are very much inspired by brawls in Hearthstone, brawls in Overwatch. It's something that we've seen and really enjoyed a lot playing other Blizzard games. The idea here is a week-long event. There isn't necessarily one up every single week. It could be every other week. We'll nail that down. But something that varies up the gameplay, something that changes up the rules and lets you jump into PvP in a new and different way. So the goals of the system, in line with a lot of what brawls serve in other Blizzard games. We want to add variation to the battleground experience. You know, Arathi Basin is awesome, Warsong Gulch is awesome. Many of us have been playing these maps for literally 12 years now, and sometimes a little twist on that experience is welcome. It also gives us a chance to experiment with some new ideas. If we want to try changing the rule sets a little bit, or trying some new match types, new game types, but we don't know for sure how they're going to play out, if they're really going to have legs, if they're fun as a little, test that we do internally, or there's something that people would want to do for months or years to come, this lets us experiment with some of those rule sets, some of those changes, and the most successful brawls could very well find themselves as permanent fixtures in our PvP landscape. And finally, the goal is for these to just be plain fun, and it lets us do some things that are wacky, a little bit different, but it's okay because it's just around for a week, and if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. So let's take a look at a video highlighting a few of these types, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. Okay, so there are many brawls planned, much like micro holidays or that sort of thing. This is an expandable system where we can keep adding new content. Let's talk real quick about some of the things we just saw. So first off, there was South Shore versus Tarren Mill, the return of the anniversary battleground, 40v40 craziness in Hillsbrad. Next, a slight variation on Warsong. It's just the Warsong Gulch map, but how does Capture the Flag play if you can cap their flag even if you don't have your own? How does that change your strategy? How do you change your approach to this time-honored map? We'll see. Next, Packed House is what we call this. What if we drop 2 15-player raid groups into one of our standard arenas like Blaze Edge or Nagrand? What does that look like? Is it balanced? I can promise it won't be, but will it be crazy? Probably. Gravity Lapse, that was the little Eye of the Storm cameo you saw there. The basic rules like gravity don't necessarily apply when you're in Netherstorm. Winter Arathi Basin is one of the cooler ones. No pun intended, sorry, actually really didn't intend that. It's Arathi Basin, except of course a blizzard has descended upon it. And it's not just a cosmetic change, you actually have very low visibility. You can only see 50 or 60 yards around you. So if you're up at Lumbermill, you certainly can't see what other people are doing. So you better communicate well as you plan your assault, plan your defense. Oh, and of course, since it's winter, all the water's frozen over, so you can just ride over all of it. Should be a cool twist. And finally, one that wasn't in the video, but is a personal favorite. So one of my favorite PvP world quests is the Bareback Brawl one up in Stormheim, where everyone can jump on various mounts. And there's a ram mount that you can get that will just send whoever you hit flying. Now, what would the Eye of the Storm battleground be like if everyone were permanently on ram mounts? We'll find out. Okay. Next up, artifacts. So artifacts, like world quests, another pillar of Legion that we are incredibly happy with, incredibly psyched about how these have turned out. And we want to and we need to continue updating them with content, with rewards, and fleshing out the system so that artifact power is something that is valuable and that you desire for as long as Legion is Legion. So first off, we're going to be introducing the ability to further empower your artifact, unlocking all new traits, never before seen, including a new gold border one, a 3-pointer, and a utility trait that you can work your way towards. At the same time, you'll also empower your existing artifact in a way that lets you put a 4th point in all of your 3-point traits. That's going to be a total of 15 new points that you can spend once you've empowered your weapon in 7.2. Of course, in order to make this reasonable, in order to make this not just a ridiculous, insane grind, there will of course be new artifact knowledge levels that will let you continue to catch up. Now, obviously, as time goes on, I actually meant to mention this in the 7.15 context, as time goes on, we become increasingly sensitive and we think a lot about alt-friendliness, about main switching, about someone who picks up the expansion a few months in and what their experience is going to be like. And so in 7.15, we're actually rolling out some artifact knowledge catch-up mechanisms where if you're a decent ways behind the cutting edge in terms of knowledge, you can just purchase knowledge levels directly with order resources from your researcher without having to wait those multiple days for the work orders up until at least 10 or more. That way you can just play the game instead of feeling like there's no point trying to progress on your alt until you get past this feeling, this arbitrary time gate. Just spend your order resources, go. Also in 7.2, we're going to be varying up relics a little bit. We're going to be introducing new types of relics that can modify not 1, but 2 traits. So you have some all-new combinations you can unlock. If there are a couple of things that you think synergize really well with each other in your artifact, you can look for items that are going to modify them in combination and really just push the power level of your weapons and your character farther than ever before. Now that's the mechanics that you'll be earning. But there's, of course, content to go with those mechanics, as there was when you first obtained your artifact and you first went out and went through the storyline that led to claiming the weapon as your own. In 7.2, we will see a continuation of that artifact quest line. And so anyone who has unlocked most of their artifact up until that point will be able to jump into 7.2, do this continuation, and that's what will allow you to further empower your weapon, unlock these additional 15 points that I just mentioned. But even further, after that, there's also a new appearance that we're going to make available for every single weapon. Now, there are 5 appearances for each artifact currently available in the game. There's the base one that you begin with. There's what we consider the upgraded or evolved form of that you get from finishing your Order campaign. There's the PvP one that you get from dedication to PvP gameplay and prestiging. There's the organized PvE one that you get from organized dungeon and raid content and a lot of perseverance there. And then there's the hidden one, which you don't get. Sorry. We're working on that. But what we're adding to flesh that out is a solo one. An appearance that recognizes not time commitment or organized gameplay, but dedication and mastery of your specialization. This is very much inspired by the Rock Delar questline back in classic World of Warcraft, by the Priest questlines for Anathema and Benediction, or more recently by Warlocks and Green Fire in Mists of Pandaria. The idea is there will be a difficult challenge that tests your skills with your spec, and if you can overcome it, then this is some of what awaits you. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly since we have 12 classes, but these are the Death Knight appearances: Frost and Holy Blood, Demon Hunter, Havoc and Vengeance, Druid. You can get that Spectral Cat form that we showed off back at Gamescom last year. Oh wait, Guardian's not on here. That's weird. Oh yeah, here. So, a very different type of bear form. This is almost like a werebear. New animations, different style. If you see one of these tanking your dungeon, you know that they're a good player because you know that they completed a challenging Guardian Druid test. Hunters. Mages. Monks. Paladins. There's that Shattered Ashbringer in the middle that, again, we showed off like well over a year ago that you'll now actually be able to get. Priests. Rogues. Shamans. Warlocks. If you want to dress up your floating skull some more, you can do that. And warriors. That's weird. That thing in the middle, that looks kind of like a flail or a morning star or something. I didn't know WoW could do that. Guess it can. Weapon physics, it's a thing. Okay, so those are some of the artifact rewards that you can earn, that you can seek out and claim if you are good enough. That's the only barrier. Dungeons. So obviously I mentioned a new dungeon coming in 7.2. We are incredibly happy with how central dungeon gameplay has been to Legion so far. With the array of dungeon content that we've had, with the Mythic Keystone system that really provides an alternate parallel progression to gearing if you're not, you have a smaller group that's not necessarily up for raiding but wants challenging content. And so we want to keep building upon that. So we're doing a few things on that front in 7.2. First off, we want to make sure that dungeons stay relevant. Right? When we move on and we have Nighthold gear and 7.2 is coming out, what's the point of running a heroic dungeon at that point? What's the point of running even a regular mythic dungeon that drops 840 gear if we're all in much better stuff than that? So when 7.2 comes out, we're actually going to increase across the board the difficulty of heroic and mythic dungeons as well as their rewards across the board. We're going to basically introduce the Tomb of Sargeras dungeon in heroic and mythic, and that will have the tuning and reward that makes sense for a dungeon in that place. And then everything else is going to be moved up right alongside it so that they all stay relevant, as opposed to the problem we often run into in the past where, let's say in 4.1, the troll dungeons come out and you don't have any reason to run the original dungeons. What that also, of course, means is that the whole Mythic Keystone system also gets renormalized and bumped up on top of that. So rather than being irrelevant, a Mythic 3 or Mythic 4 will go back to being challenging and relevant for the intended audience alongside the Tomb of Sargeras raid in 7.2. Karazhan. Now, initially, it felt like, man, 9 bosses or 8 bosses, depending on how you're viewing it in Karazhan, that's really tough to have as one dungeon experience without a weekly lockout. In 7.2, we're going to break this up into upper and lower sections that will be available as 4-boss Mythic Keystone runs, but they'll also be queuable random heroics. Also, at the same time, we're going to add queuable heroic versions of Court of Stars and Archway, so that if you are the heroic dungeon player, if you're not someone who jumps into match-made or to organized non-match-made mythic dungeons, you basically have 5 new dungeons coming your way for your playstyle in patch 7.2. Oh yeah, speaking of mythic keystones, one of the great things about this is that it's an expandable system. We can keep adding new variables, new ways of interacting with the system. So expect some new affixes coming your way. For those of you in the crowd who are some hardcore progression raiders, if you've done Mythic Il'gynoth and you know how the bloods work, imagine if every mob in the dungeon were an Il'gynoth blood. Just imagine. It's great. What? Why don't you guys think it's great? I give up. Okay, so 7.2, pretty large patch for Legion. Outdoor questing zone, 9-boss raid, 4-boss dungeon, Legion assaults, PvP brawls, artifact challenges with new traits, dungeon updates, flight in the Broken Isles, and new class mounts, and more. When is this coming? Oh. No, actually soon TM, sorry. But right after 7.15 PTR is done, again, apologies to those of you who hate content, but get used to there often, almost always being something on the PTR. The second something comes down, we're going to have a new thing to put back up because the content train marches on, and that's how it goes. So 7.1, 7.15, 7.2, there'll of course be a 7.25 after that. So yeah, I mean, at the end of 7.2, we will have delved into the depths of the Tomb of Sargeras. We will have vanquished the avatar of Sargeras again. We will have stopped Kil'jaeden himself. We will have used the Pillars of Creation to seal off the Legion's invasion of Azeroth. Feels a lot like that's where this story should come to an end. I mean, in a lot of ways, Icecrown Citadel is kind of like the Tomb of Sargeras of Wrath, and that's where that ended. So, where else is there to go after this? Well, if you've been listening to Illidan, if you've been listening to and learning about the nature of the Legion, you know that they're likely to be back. We may win a brief respite. We may save ourselves for a day or two, for even a year or two. But what will come after that? They'll just be back for more. Where else could we go in our search for the end of the Legion? If we want to stop the Legion, if we want to truly win peace for Azeroth, we're going to need to look beyond the land around us, beyond the Broken Isles, beyond Azeroth itself, to the skies. We are going to need to go to Argus. Now, we're going to have a whole lot more to talk about when it comes to this in the future, but there's almost nothing that I can say that would not be a tremendous spoiler right now. But suffice it to say, this story and our journey is far from over. We have an epic tale, an epic story, and an epic amount of content prepared coming your way. Thank you so much for joining us for the ride. Hang on tight, because it's going to be a great one.